guys can see the presentation. Okay, so today we are talking about scaling your food business and selling your product to retail stores. So I have a lot of information for you guys today. Please don't feel too overwhelmed with it. I know it's a lot to take in. We will have times for a couple of breaks, and we will have time for lots and lots of questions throughout the presentation. So I have broken today's session, because we're going for about 2.5 hours. I've broken it out into 3 sections. And so at the end of each section, you will have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have about what we just talked about. And then at the end, we can open it up to any questions. So if you have other questions about your food business, I'm happy to help with that stuff too. So if you are thinking about questions as we go through this, feel free to pop it into the chat function, and I will pull up the chat once we get to those question break periods. And otherwise, once we get to those question break periods, you can also take yourself off mute and turn your video on and ask your question verbally, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So without further ado, let's get started by talking about how to position your product for retail sales. So this is the first step. I really want to make sure that you guys are ready to talk to these retail stores before we put you in front of them. And so this portion of the presentation is going to be all about what questions are these retailers going to be asking you when you do get in front of them, and how can you answer these questions in a way that makes your product more attractive to these retailers and gets them more likely to say yes. The second portion of the presentation, we're going to go over an actual step-by-step process for how you go out and approach these retailers. What do you say? What do you do? How do you approach them? How do you follow up to secure that sale? And then the third portion of tonight's presentation will be talking about how do you actually scale your business. Once you get your product into these retail stores, what do you do to keep it on store shelves and make sure it sells? How do you partner with distributors, and when does it make sense to partner with distributors in order to take your business to the next level? So that's kind of a 30,000 foot view of what we'll be talking about. Now, in this first portion, we're going to start out by talking about how do you actually think like a retailer. This is the most important starting place for this conversation, because if we can get you thinking like a retailer, if we can get you putting yourself into their shoes, you're going to be so much more likely to be able to interact with them in a way that gets them to say yes. Then we'll talk about how to position your product on the market and earn retailers' trust and credibility. And then we're going to dive into some of the nitty-gritty. So we'll talk about how to actually price your product, how to set up your MOQ, what lead times you should have, and your shelf life considerations for getting your product actually onto store shelves. Now, before I dive into all of that though, I did want to do a brief introduction about myself and who I am, so that you guys can have an understanding of why it is I'm qualified to talk to you about getting your food product into retail stores. So as Kaylin had mentioned, I actually was working in the corporate world for the better part of a decade. And I was really just doing basically the same thing day in and day out. I was going to the same beige cubicle, putting the same information into spreadsheets, sending emails, and it was just boring for me. It wasn't the right fit for me to be working in the corporate world. And so as I continued to do this day in and day out for so long, I started to realize there has to be more to life than sitting in a beige cubicle all day. There has to be something more fulfilling, more adventurous, something cooler I could be doing with my life. Now, I'm really into health and wellness. I eat a clean, whole food diet. I run every single day. It's a big part of my life. But I also really, really love dessert. So like cakes, cookies, cheesecake, anything you put in front of me, I will eat it because I love sweets. But those two things typically do not go hand in hand, right? Living a healthy lifestyle and eating dessert all the time. And so I was out there trying to find desserts that were a bit healthier, things that didn't have a ton of refined sugar in them. I was looking for products that were gluten-free, dairy-free, things like that. And I just could not find it on the market. And so I started making these products for myself in my home kitchen. And It stayed, I did it for a little while and it stayed a bit of a hobby for a while. I enjoyed doing it, but I didn't really think of it as a business until I was going on a business trip with the corporate job that I was still in at the time. And I had been told it was going to be a very busy business trip, not a whole lot of time to stop and snack. But I'm a big snacker. And so I knew I needed something. So the night before that business trip, I went to the grocery store. I beelined it for the energy bar aisle, thinking energy bars would be the way to go. Great grab and go snack to just throw in my bag and away I go. And I must have walked up and down that energy bar aisle 50 times, picking up every single energy bar, flipping it over, reading the ingredient list, and realizing there's nothing here that I want to consume. Everything has artificial additives, preservatives, refined sugar, basically just a ton of stuff in it that I didn't want to be eating. And so I left the grocery store that day empty-handed. I went home, opened my pantry doors and pulled out everything I thought would taste great in an energy bar, threw it in a bowl and kind of hoped for the best. So I bring these bars with me on this business trip and my colleagues are asking me to try them. They try them and they love them too. That for me was a turning point because I thought, okay, I have a product that it's not just me that loves this. Other people are really into this. Even people that aren't into health food are into this product. So I must be on to something. And so from that point, it took me about 3 months to build up the courage. But eventually I walked into my boss's office and handed in my resignation, cold turkey, quit my corporate job and jumped full time into the food industry, which was wild because I had never worked in the food industry before. I had no business education at the time and I really did not know what I was doing. And so I kind of just went for it. So that business started as a very tiny farmer's market booth where I was selling all of the baked goods that I originally was making in my home kitchen. And eventually over the course of that 4 years, it turned into an energy bar company. And with that energy bar company, I was able to scale to a national level, supplying about 300 retailers coast to coast across Canada. So it was cool. It was the adventure I needed at the time. It definitely was a big, big change for me and shook up my life in such incredible ways. But eventually I realized I loved coaching other entrepreneurs on how to get from where they are today to where they want their business to be. And so that's what I do now. I help entrepreneurs like yourselves figure out the stepping stones between where you are now and where you want to see your business go through one-on-one business coaching. So enough about me. I want to talk to you guys about what it is that the retailer wants from you. So I want you guys to go on a little bit of a journey with me here. Imagine that you are the owner of a retail store. So instead of starting a company that makes beans and pulses, instead of starting a company that is selling mushrooms, you have decided to open a boutique health food store. And you started your business about 3 years ago, and you're working really, really hard to make a living. But it is hard to do so because before you have opened the doors to your store, you have had to spend tens of thousands of dollars on inventory, right? Because no one wants to walk into an empty retail store. And so you've had to go out and buy all these different products and spend tens of thousands of dollars before you even open your doors, before you make 1 cent. Now, in doing so, you really wanted to make sure that you stocked your store shelves with fantastic products. And so you went out and sourced all the products that you yourself know and love, or products that your friends are telling you are really great, right? And you are trying to sell all this product, push it off your store shelves because you're trying to save up to take your kids on the first vacation they have been on in 3 years, right? Now, some of these products that you know and love are selling really, really well. They're selling like hotcakes. But some of these products are just sitting there collecting dust. And you've tried everything you can think of. You've moved them to different positions in the store. You've put them on sale. You've done promotions and nothing's working. And you really thought these products would be so great. Now, if you have imagined this as yourself, you are the owner of this retail store. If this is you, what is it that you would want? For the most part, what independent retailers want is exactly what you guys want. It's exactly what I want. It's what we all want as entrepreneurs, right? What they want is to earn a living. They want to keep their lights on, they want to put food on their table, and they want to take their kids on vacation, right? So if this is the case, then the best way to make your product attractive to retailers isn't convincing them that your product is good, that it tastes good, right? It's actually convincing them that it will sell if they bring it into their store. Now, this is a subtle difference, but it is a difference. Because remember, you as the retail store owner have brought in a bunch of products that you thought were just phenomenal, taste really good, you buy them, you know them, you love them, and some of them aren't moving. And so they know, the retailers know, that a really great tasting product does not necessarily equate to a product that will actually sell. And so this is what we're going to talk about in this section of the presentation is how do we convince these retailers that this product will sell? So I'm going to walk you through all the questions that these retailers are going to ask you. And what they're trying to get to the heart of when they ask you these questions is, if I take a risk and I buy this product and I bring it into my store, do I think I'll make the money back on it? Do I think it'll sell? And do I think it'll help contribute to me taking my kids on vacation? So the first question they're going to ask you is, what is it that makes your product different? Right? So your product has to be in some sort of way, shape, or form significantly different than the other products in your same category. And for most products, again, it does need to be more than just the quality and the taste. Now, this becomes especially true if you're in a really saturated market. So I was in a very saturated market, like energy bars, right? So if you have an energy bar, if you have a hot sauce, if you have a coffee, if you have a chocolate or a chocolate bar, those are all very saturated markets where there's a whole lot of products out there. So if you have a product where you can walk into a store and you can see that there's an entire shelf filled with like 50 to 100 different brands of that same product, then you're in a saturated market. And this becomes so incredibly important because you have to convince the retailer that there's a reason to bring your product in when they already have a whole bunch of other products that are just like this. The other thing to remember is that it needs to be a reason that your customers actually care about, right? Because we don't want to just get your product on store shelves. We want to make sure we get it on store shelves and then it actually sells and it actually moves off those store shelves. So I got to tell you guys a story about a client that came to me with a peanut butter cookie. And so he came to me and he was like, Nicole, I have the best peanut butter cookie that you will ever try. It's so delicious. It's so good. You're going to love it. I'm going to send you some samples. You're going to try it. You're going to fall in love with it. And I was like, that's fantastic. I love a peanut butter cookie. So please send away. And he said, the only problem is I'm taking this peanut butter cookie to retail stores and, nobody's saying yes. I don't know what I'm doing wrong because I know I have a great product and I'm giving them samples and they're trying it and they say it's delicious too, but nobody's actually saying yes to, bringing it into their store. So what is it I'm doing wrong? And so I said to him, listen, the reality is I have never met a peanut butter cookie that I didn't love. Right? And so if I'm a retail store owner and I already have 5 great tasting peanut butter cookies on my store shelf, and you're coming to me telling me that your peanut butter cookie tastes really good, well, that's awesome. And I might even agree with you that it's a great tasting peanut butter cookie, but you haven't really given me a reason why I need yours in addition to the 5 others that I already have on my store shelf. So I said, what are the different features of the product? So he lists out all these features. He says it's sugar-free, or it's low sugar, it's high fiber, it's vegan, it's high protein, and it's keto. Like he said all these different things. And I said, okay, that's a lot of features. Out of those 5 features, what is it that your customers are coming to you for? So he had a farmer's market booth and I was like, you're selling a lot of product at the farmer's market. Why is it that your customers are buying this product? And he said, oh, it's because it's a high protein peanut butter cookie. That's the main thing that people are looking for. Because I get a lot of gym rats and a lot of guys that want to build muscle looking for high protein products. And they say to me, you can find a high protein oatmeal raisin cookie. and you can find a high protein chocolate chip cookie, but you really can't find a high protein peanut butter cookie. And then when they try it and it tastes great, it really seals the deal. And I said, then that is your thing. That's your thing that you need to go back to these stores with. And so I said, go back to the stores, position it as a high protein peanut butter cookie and see what they say. And they all started saying yes, one after another, after another. He started getting these retailers rolling in. So the reason I tell you this story is because if you are positioning your product as a product that tastes really good right now, I don't want you to panic. You don't have to change your formulation. You don't have to scrap the product altogether. But what I want you to do is perhaps change the focus, change what you're talking about when you talk about your product. Then once you have that focus, that thing that significantly differentiates you from the rest of the products on the market, I want you to formulate a value proposition so that you can describe the value to the retailer. So what is a value proposition, you ask? So there are so many different ways to do a value proposition. I'm going to teach you guys the way that I learned how to do it because I found it to be very helpful in creating kind of a slogan for my business and describing the value that I had to the retailers, direct to customer, basically to everyone. So what I want you to do is develop 3 sentences that describe the value that you are offering to your customers. So the first sentence is, what is your product? So very, very basic, like what is it that you are offering to customers? The second sentence is, how is it different? So this is your differentiator, right? What makes it different from all the rest of the products out there? And then the third piece is, what is the ultimate value that you are offering to your customers? Now, when you think of ultimate value, I want you to think about happiness, because at the end of the day, what we are all selling is happiness, right? We want to make our customers happy. We want to improve their lives in some sort of significant way. So I'm going to give you an example of this because I know it's kind of hard to get your mind around without an example. So this is mine. So very basic, what I was offering was a whole food energy bar. The differentiator for me is that they tasted great. Now I know that I just got finished telling you guys not to differentiate based on taste and flavor. You can sometimes, very rarely, you can get away with this. If you are in a category that is very well known for having products that do not taste good at all and that are just eaten for functionality and that's it, you can get away with saying, I have a product that's both functional and also actually tastes good. So energy bars are this for most people. If you say to people who have eaten energy bars in the past, like, oh, don't they all taste like cardboard? Most people say like, yes, absolutely. They taste like nothing, or they tend to have a really bad aftertaste because of the protein powders that are used. So this was a differentiator, and the retailers picked up on that and immediately said, we don't actually have an energy bar that anybody in our store thinks tastes good. So this might actually work out. The third piece, and this is your ultimate value. So my ultimate value, excuse me, was that I had a whole food energy bar that tastes great so that the customer doesn't have to sacrifice flavor for the sake of their health. If there's anybody in this room right now that's a healthy eater, lives a healthy lifestyle, right? This is gold. This is gold to all of us, right? Because we eat products that don't taste good, that don't have any flavor whatsoever, because we want to try and stay healthy. And so we're always having to sacrifice eating delicious food for eating healthy food. And so I was saying to the world, I have a healthy food product that also actually tastes really good. So you don't have to make that sacrifice anymore. You get to have both, right? This is the kind of thing you want to be thinking about, is how can you significantly improve your customer's life? Now, once you have this value proposition, it's going to help you very clearly articulate to the retailer why it is that they need your product in their store. Now, the only thing I don't want you to do is please don't repeat your value proposition word for word, because that's going to make you sound like a robot. And that's not, we don't want to sound like robots. We are in the business of building relationships with other human beings. And so this is what sales is all about. You'll probably hear me repeat this over and over again in tonight's session, is that we want to build relationships. And so you really just want to use the general idea of your value proposition to convey that value to the retailer in a conversational way. Second question that they're going to ask you, and basically every single retailer is going to ask you this: who else sells this product? Now, I remember when I first heard this question, and it felt like a trick question to me, because I was like, do I say everybody sells it and it's a really popular product? Or do I say no one sells it and it's super exclusive to you, right? I wanted to position it the right way. But I want to tell you guys, it's not actually a trick question. Basically, the retailer just needs you to convince them, again, that your product is actually going to sell if they bring it into their store, which means they want to hear you say that your product is in a whole lot of stores. And specifically, they would love to hear you say stores that they know and have a great brand and a great reputation in your area. So that's the answer to this question is, this person selling it, this person selling it, and this person selling it. I would say choose your top 3 retailers that give you a ton of credibility and talk about those. Now, if you are not in any other retailers yet, don't panic, because there's actually a different way to answer this question. Truly, the question isn't really who else sells this. The question again is, are people buying this product? The retailer is looking for social proof from you, right? So if you say, yes, other retail stores are selling this product, they then know the product must be selling quite well. Because if it wasn't selling well, you might be in those stores for a second, but then you'd probably get delisted, right? So if you're in these stores, the retailer knows it's probably selling well, people are probably buying it, which means if I bring it into my store, people will probably buy it here too, right? And so there are multiple ways to convey that same level of credibility to these retailers. It's not just talking about the other stores you are in. So you can achieve the same thing through mentioning things like publicity. So if you've been featured on any news channels, if you've had articles written about you, even if you've been in any business programs that sound really good, you can talk about those things, right? Because oftentimes you have to apply to get into business programs. And if you've gotten it into one, it again lends your business some credibility. You can also talk about farmers market or online sales figures. So one of the things that works very, very well with retailers in the food space is telling them that customers are asking for this product at their store, if they are. So let's say you have a farmers market booth and you're selling really, really well at that market booth, and you are hearing customers say, okay, I'm buying, these 12 bars right now, but I know I'll need more like midway through the week. It would be really, really great if you sold your bars in this store down the street from me so that I could just pop in on my way home from work and buy some. If you can go to that retail store and tell them customers are literally asking for this product to be in the store, retailers will say yes, like 99% of the time, because they can't ignore what their customers are asking for. Again, that is, money left on the table if they don't bring that product in, because they know people are willing to buy it from them. Another thing you can do is just talk about how you're selling out consistently at your farmer's market, or you're doing really, really well online as well. Just anything that builds trust and credibility with the retailer is going to be key here. Okay, so some of the nitty-gritty pieces. One of the first questions they are going to ask you is, what is my price, right? These retailers are very price conscious because they are taking a risk on buying your product. Once you sell it to them, they have purchased it from you and they have spent that money. They don't then know if they're going to be able to resell it. They think they might because they think you have a great product and hopefully you've positioned it well, but they don't 100% know. And so they really want to think about, okay, how much am I buying this for? And what am I going to potentially be able to resell it for? How much am I going to make in margin when I resell it? So when they ask this question, what is my price? What they're really asking is, what is my price and what is the SRP? Now, this industry is Notorious for using acronyms. People will throw out things like SRP, MOQ, and you're not going to know what it is until someone explains it to you. And unfortunately for me, that a lot of the time that was the retailer. So I want to demystify some of these acronyms for you guys today so that you sound like you know what you're talking about when you go into these meetings. So SRP just means suggested retail price. So this is the price that you are going to suggest the retailer sell your product for. Usually it's going to be the same price that you sell it direct to customer for. So if you're selling at a farmer's market, if you're selling online, if you're going to events and pop-ups, things like that, you're going to suggest the same price. Now, it is important to know though that it is just a suggestion. So again, the retailers are purchasing this product from you, and once they've bought it, it is theirs. And so within reason, they can do basically what they want with it. And so I had retailers that would buy it and they would literally put it in their back room for their staff to eat because their staff loved the bars. I had retailers that would buy it and would put it, out front and also at the back. Like, they can do what they want with it. Most of the time, the retailers are going to price it at your SRP. Most of the time, you're not going to have an issue. If there is any issue with what the retailer is doing with your product or how they're pricing it, you can have a conversation with them about it as well. I had a couple of retailers price it as low as $2.99. So my SRP was $3.50. And I had some retailers price it as low as $2.99 and some priced it as high as $4.29. But I would say 99% of the retailers just priced it at my SRP of $3.50. So don't worry too much about this. Now the second piece of this, so what's my price is what is the wholesale price. So this is the price that they are buying it from you at, so that they can then resell it at a higher price at your SRP and make a margin on the sale of your product. So in setting your wholesale price, this is a very tricky thing when you're first starting out. You don't necessarily know how to price your product. And I remember trying to figure this out and talking to a ton of business mentors that had never been in the food industry before. And they gave me all sorts of different ranges and different numbers. Some just straight up said, I can't tell you, I don't know, because I'm not in that industry. But if you have been in the food industry, you will know, and I'm here to tell you guys today, that your wholesale price, you want to set it so that the retailer gets a 30 to 35% margin on the sale of your product. So that means you want to price it low enough so that when they resell it, they're going to make 30 to 35% margin. Now, in order to do this calculation, I wanted to break this out for you because math is not my forte. And if anybody in the room is like me and hates math, I wanted to make this as simple as possible for you guys. So the calculation literally is you take your SRP and you multiply by the inverse number to what you want to offer to the retailer. Now, if you are in a saturated industry, you're probably going to go on the high end of this. So energy bars, I was offering a 34% margin. If you have a super unique product, something that's totally different from everybody else, or something that's very, very trendy and is in high demand, you can tend to get away with the lower end, so maybe 30 to 32%. So you're going to have to decide within that range what makes sense for your product. But once you do, you want to take the inverse number and multiply it by your SRP. So for example, my SRP was $3.50 and I was giving the retailers a 34% margin. So I multiplied by 66%, right? The inverse number. And that gave me my wholesale price of $2.31. So that's how you want to set your pricing. Okay, the next question is, what's your MOQ? Another acronym, right? So MOQ just means minimum order quantity. I have a story that we probably don't have time today for, but when I found out what MOQ meant, it was in a meeting with a grocery buyer from Metro, the grocery store, which is not where you guys want to be when you figure this out. So MOQ is minimum order quantity. This is the minimum amount of product that the retailers have to buy from you in order to get your wholesale price. And so what that means is that basically you are giving them a reduced price that they're buying it at, right? They're not buying it at $3.50 like everyone else. They're getting a reduced price of $2.31. But in exchange for that, they're giving you volume. And so they can't just buy one bar at $2.31. They have to maybe buy 5 cases of your product to make it worth your while. Now, setting this is agonizing. I remember going back and forth on this a million times before I finally settled on 5 cases. The reason it's so challenging is because it really is a balancing act between what the retailer wants and what you want. So the retailer basically wants you to not have an MOQ. I would still suggest that you do set one, even if you're very early on in your business. Because again, credibility is really everything in this industry. And if you don't have an MOQ, the retailer will know that you're very new. Because most people have, like, everybody has an MOQ, right? And so if they ask you what's your MOQ and you say, oh, it's nothing, you can just buy 1 bar if you want to, they are gonna know that you're a relatively new company, and it detracts from your credibility. So you wanna have something, even if it's relatively low, even if it's 1 case, right? So the retailer does want it to be as low as possible though, because again, they're taking a risk on your product. They don't know if it's going to sell. They've never tried to sell it before. And so they're spending $150, $200, $300 on your product, and they're going to hope that it's going to work out. So the lower, really, the better. But for you, you of course want to sell as much as possible. We all want to get as much volume as possible, right? And so you're wanting to set it quite high. So here is how you land on a really good number, a really good MOQ. So what I want you to do is consider how much you think how much of the product you think the retailer can sell before it expires. This is really, really key here, guys, because if your product expires on store shelves, it becomes very difficult. It's not impossible, but it does become very, very difficult to convince the retailer to bring it back in. Because remember, like, always go back to that image you have in your head. The retailer is just like you. They are an entrepreneur as well. They're trying to put food on their table and take their kids on vacation, right? And so what they've done is taken a financial risk on buying your product and bringing it into their store. Now, if that risk does not pay off for them, if your product expires and they're just kind of out that money, then they know it's probably not going to work if they bring it in for a second time. So it becomes really difficult to convince them to try it again. So you want to think about how long of a shelf life do you have? Now, if you have like a 2-year shelf life, this isn't really going to matter that much because you could probably sell like 20 cases and have it not be an issue. But if you have a shorter shelf life, you really want to consider the category you're in and how saturated the space is. So for me, for instance, energy bars, right? I was competing with 50 other energy bars on that store shelf. So if somebody was to walk into that health food store and they may or may not decide to buy an energy bar that day, right? And so that's potentially a lost sale right there. But if they do decide to buy an energy bar, they have 50 choices. So I am one of 50. Which means that it's a product that's going to turn slowly. So if it's going to turn slowly, then I know that this product is going to sit on that store shelf for quite a while, which means my minimum order quantity has to be relatively small, right, in order to get it to turn before it expires. So you really do want to kind of run those calculations in your head and take into consideration all of those things. Now, the next thing you want to factor in is also the dollar amount of your MOQ. So as I said, if you have a 2-year shelf life, you don't really have to worry about your product expiring before it sells. It's probably going to sell before it goes bad, right? But you still can't set your MOQ at 20 cases, because if you do, your MOQ dollar amount might be like $1,000. That's quite the risk for a retailer to take on one new product. right? So what you want to do is kind of find that sweet spot in terms of a dollar amount that you think the retailer will be willing to risk on bringing your product in. Usually this is somewhere between $150 and $300 is a good sweet spot for an MOQ. Anything north of 300 and the retailer is going to second guess and question whether or not this is the right purchase for them. And that's not what we want to do here. We want to give them every reason to say yes and bring your product in. So the next question they're going to have is, how long will it take to get? Some retailers, most retailers believe that you can magically make products appear the minute that they need them. And I just think that they forget that they are food products that actually have to be produced by a human being, right? Especially in the early days, you guys are probably hand producing your products, which means you need time to actually make them. I had, when I was first starting out and I was selling my vegan donuts wholesale to cafes in the area, I had one cafe owner that, like, notoriously without fail, he would show up at the back door of my facility at like 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, knocking on the door, and he was like, I'm completely out of donuts. I need like 6 dozen donuts right now. And I was like, you can have 2 dozen. I have 2 dozen right now for you. You're going to have to come back later for the rest. And so I think that they forget this is a hand-produced product. So again, it's going to be a balancing act between the amount of time you need to actually produce that product and get it out to them and what they want, which is to have it right away. This also applies to retail stores as well. It's not just a food service or a cafe thing. Because again, if the retailer knows your product sells really well, and this is the hope, you get your product onto store shelves, it does really well, it's probably going to sell out before they realize that it's sold out. And if that shelf is empty, that is wasted money for them, right? Because they could be selling that product to every single person that walks through that door. So every person that comes through that retailer's door, they're thinking, oh, they might have bought that energy bar, but they're not buying it because the store shelf is empty. So they want it as soon as humanly possible. Now, a standard for lead times in this industry is 5 to 7 business days. I'm going to highly, highly encourage you guys to set this as your lead time up front, even if you are just starting out and you think you can get it to them faster. The reason is you want to set that expectation in the first place, because as you grow and scale your business, you will not have the time to be throwing the product together and, jumping in your car and driving down the street and hand delivering it to that retailer. You're going to get really busy. You might even get out of production at some point and be doing sales and managing the supply chain and doing other things that have nothing to do with the delivery of that product. And what that means is it's going to be produced. That's going to take a little bit of time. And then it's going to have to go out in probably a courier, or someone else is going to have to deliver it for you, which again takes more time. And so you want to set that expectation up front that it's going to take about 5 to 7 business days to get this product to you. Now, here's the cool thing. If you say 5 to 7 business days right now, and it only takes you 2 business days, they are going to be so thrilled. These retailers are going to love you, because they'll be like, oh, I wasn't expecting it yet. I thought it would come, next Friday, and here it is today. They're going to think that's just incredible. But the opposite is also true. If you set the expectation today that it only takes 2 days, or worse yet, the same day, to get this product, and then you start to kind of grow and scale your business, and it's taking longer and longer and longer, the retailers are going to get annoyed about that. And they might even start to resent your growth, right? Some retailers really love to support local producers. And if they start to see your growth as a food producer as problematic for them and what their needs are, they might start to get less inclined to bring your product in. So always under promise and over deliver. I promise you, they will love you for it. Now, the next question they're going to have for you is, what is the shelf life of this product? So retailers need for your product to last a reasonable amount of time in order to ensure that it moves before it expires. Because remember, they've bought this product, they've invested the money, they really need to make sure that it actually sells before the expiry date. And so you want to aim for the smaller retailers, you want to aim for a shelf life of at least 3 months. Now, the reason for that is because you need to make sure that you're producing this product, you give yourself your 5 to 7 business day lead time, right? And then you get it to that retailer and it has to sit there before the customer buys it. And then once the customer buys it, they might not consume it right away either. They might throw it in their pantry and forget about it for like a month, and then open their pantry doors and be like, oh yeah, this energy bar, I wanted to try this. So you really do need to make sure that you have a decent amount of time there on your product. If you are starting out with like 1 week or 2 weeks, it isn't really long enough. So you'll have to look at elongating your shelf life before getting into retail stores. Now, once you start getting into the larger retailers, if this is a part of your strategy and your plan is to eventually work with the Loblaws of the world, the Whole Foods, the Costcos, you really do need to have a shelf life of at least 6 months. That really is the bare minimum. I know Loblaws has a non-negotiable 6-month shelf life, that it has to hit that 6 months or they just completely will not take it. They won't even consider it. So if that is your goal to eventually get into those bigger stores, I would encourage you to start thinking about your shelf life now and start thinking about how might I elongate this shelf life. There are so many different ways to do this. And honestly, shelf life is a very complicated topic, and it's not a one-for-one thing. If you're looking at a competitor's product and saying my product will probably last the same amount of time, it's not going to be accurate because there's different production methods, there's different ingredients, there's different quantities of those ingredients. It's going to be different. And so really you do want to start thinking about, how can I preserve this for longer? Does it require refrigeration? Does it require freezing? Am I going to want to add preservatives to it? If I want to keep it natural, could I potentially add natural preservatives to it? Packaging extends your shelf life. If you have some sort of heat treatment, whether it's pasteurization or baking or something like that, that elongates your shelf life. Like there's so many things and it is quite complex, but I would encourage you to start thinking about that now because the retailers do really want to have a longer shelf life as you get into those bigger guys. Okay, now the last question that they are going to ask you when you meet with them is, can you send me more information? I remember hearing this question and I was like, sure, no problem, as you do, right? Sure, absolutely, no problem. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, what information is it that they want? I'm pretty sure I just gave them all the information about this product that I could possibly think of. So the good news is, it's not anything, it's not a trick question, it's not anything out of the ordinary. Basically, they just want to have some sort of document, whether it's a PDF or a printed document, that has all the information that we just talked about. Because essentially what they want to do is take your product and go away for a little bit and try and make a decision on whether or not this product is the right fit for their store. And so they want to mull it over and they want to look over all of this information. Now, when I figured this out, the first thing I did was go back to my office and pull up a Word document. This is really cringy, but pulled up a Word document and I threw my logo into the top of the Word document and I put in a couple bullet points about the information we just talked about and I hit send, and that was it. I would encourage you not to do this because what we want to do here is create a sales document. We don't just want it to be informational. If you think about this document, this PDF or this printed document you're going to bring with you, this has to sell your product without you being there. And so yes, you do want to have all the information in there that they're looking for, that they need to make their decision. But you also want to have information in there like customer testimonials, the logos of some of the other retailers that you're working with, or anything to build credibility. Any sort of impressive metrics that you have around your business, really just anything that helps to convince these retailers, this is a great product, it's popular, people are buying it, And if you bring it in, people will buy it from you too. It will sell. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So a lot of people call this a sell sheet. So if you hear the term sell sheet, this is what it means. And so oftentimes people will use one piece of paper to create a sell sheet. If you haven't noticed already, I tend to be very wordy. And so I wanted a little bit more room than what a sell sheet could offer me. So I really wanted to include some great sales information in there that would help convince them to make this decision. And so what I did was combine all this information into what I called a partner package. And so it was a multi-page document that I would print off and bring with me to my sales meetings. So we're going to get into that in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to prep you for that in advance. Okay, so we are at the end of this first section. So I do want to stop sharing and I want to see if there are any questions that I can answer in the meantime before we move on. So I do see that there is one here in the chat. And if you guys do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can also take yourself off of mute and ask your question. But I am going to address this one first because I can see that it's in here. So are there consultants that create these partner packages? So none that I know of offhand. I actually help my clients. So I take one-on-one business coaching clients. And I actually help my clients create these. So I have a template that I've created from my own partner package, and it's in Canva. So I don't know, Tony, if you've ever used Canva in the past, but it's a fantastic free tool that you can use to create really beautifully designed documents. Does that help answer your question? So I will provide that template in Canva to my clients, and then I walk them through each of those steps, and they'll go away and do kind of homework in working on that partner package, and then come back and I'll give them feedback on it. Okay, amazing. Okay, so Nora is saying, how do you test for shelf life? Yes. If you work with the OAFVC, do they help you determine that? Is there a window of time, for frozen produce? Okay, so the question for the OAFVC, I can hand over to Kaylin.
Yeah, good question. So they do business services there. They were changing some services, so I can certainly take that information back and just get a better answer for you on that. So Nora, I do have your email. I'm just so happy to connect with you and the operations specialist, Neil, directly, who can help with that. So
awesome. Very cool. And if they're able to help, amazing. That's going to be your best resource, really. But there are other food labs as well within Southwestern Ontario. So there's the Niagara Wine and Food Institute. Guelph University has a food lab as well. Fanshawe College here in London, where I'm from, has one. And so there are a number, usually academic institutions have some sort of food lab attached to them where they can do this sort of thing. And so they will test for your shelf life. And truly having someone test for it is the only way you're going to know an accurate shelf life. Doing this guessing game, like I played the guessing game too, guys, where I was like, well, my ingredients, the fastest expiration of this ingredient or of all of my ingredients is 6 months. And so that means my product should last 6 months. But when you combine all these ingredients together, it changes the chemical composition of those ingredients, which then changes the shelf life. So playing the guessing game, it doesn't really work. I would always suggest that you do get it tested. And in terms of a window of time for frozen produce, kind of the same answer. I can't tell you that because there's no quick and easy way to determine shelf life without testing. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Nora, do you have another question? Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
I put it in the chat.
Okay, amazing. Person or email, do you recommend approaching them first when you're still small and focusing on local? Yes. Okay, so we're going to dive into that next. So all of these questions they're going to be asking you are typically in person. And that's why I want to prepare you guys for these conversations before you go into it, because I know exactly how intimidating it is to walk through the door of these retail stores, having no idea what questions they're going to ask you, having no idea how to answer their questions, and just being kind of stuck on the spot. And so that's kind of the next section. I'm going to walk you through, like, what is the process for actually approaching them, and then getting in person and what that conversation looks like in person. Cool. Okay, Tony, asked, do you recommend using a distributor or contracting these stores directly? Again, this is coming up. So initially, I recommend talking to the stores directly, one-to-one, because that's going to be your fastest and easiest way to get into a handful of stores right away. And you can actually do it fairly quickly if you follow the process that I'm going to tell you about in a few minutes. And then once you have those stores under your belt, kind of your starting stores, that's when you would talk to a distributor. Again, credibility is really everything in this industry. And the distributors want to know that your product is going to sell, just like the retailers. And so the way that the distributor fact checks if your product is going to sell is by saying to you, well, how many stores are you in? What stores are you in? How many stores are you in? How is it selling? What's your turn rate, right? And so really, in order to effectively work with a distributor, you do have to have a few stores under your belt first. I hope that helps. Okay, awesome. Okay, any more questions right now? No? Okay, amazing. Are we good to keep going? Do people need a break? No? Okay, we're good to keep going? Amazing. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the next presentation and we will dive in. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk then about approaching and actually securing these retailers and what this process itself looks like. So in this portion of the presentation, I want to start out by talking to you guys about what to expect in selling to these retailers, because it might be different from what you are expecting. It definitely was different from what I was expecting. And so I want to walk you through that, because if we can start this process with realistic expectations of what this looks like, it's going to make everything so much easier for you. Then I want to move on and actually show you this process. So it starts with creating a list of stores to approach. And then I'm going to talk to you about that initial outreach to these retailers. Then we'll talk about that in-person meeting and what does that look like. And Nora, all the questions they're going to ask you, that's the time they're going to ask them. And then I'm going to talk to you guys about the one thing that you can do to increase your sales so significantly. I basically doubled my sales when I started doing this part of the process. And so I want to share that with you guys today. And then we'll round out this portion by talking about some incentives that you can offer to get retailers off the fence. If you feel like they're interested in your product, but they're just not quite saying yes, there are some things that you can do to really get them off the fence and get them bringing your product in. So let's start out with what to expect. When I started approaching retailers, in all honesty, guys, I expected them all to say yes. I really did. And I know that sounds, whatever, but I thought I have a great product, and I just was so behind this product. I believed in it so much that I thought there is no way people are going to say no to this. They're going to try it. They're going to fall in love with it, just like I did. And of course, they're going to want to bring it into their store because it's so good. Now, I started approaching stores, and immediately I started hearing no, over and over again. And I was like, maybe they just don't know how good this product is. Maybe I should try a little harder to convince them. Now, I am not a natural salesperson. Sales does not come naturally to me. And in fact, I had sales jobs in the past when I was a teenager that I got demoted from because I was not good at it. But I had learned a process that they teach you to do traditionally in sales. And that process involved a lot of being forceful and pushy, not taking no for an answer, doing the overcoming of objections, and all the things that you're taught to traditionally do, right? Most of us have had some horrible sales job in the past where they teach you to do these things. And if you haven't, you've probably at some point talked to a telemarketer where you have said no so many times and they won't let you get off the phone. They're like, but this thing. And you're like, oh my gosh. So here's the thing. People do not like to be sold to. You do not like to be sold to. When you have that telemarketing call and you say no, a polite but firm no, you expect for that person to respect your decision and let you get off the phone. And when they don't, it really rubs you the wrong way, doesn't it? We all feel this way. No one likes to be sold to. But this was the only way that I knew how to do sales. And so I started trying to do this. And let me tell you, it did not work at all. It did not work at all. I was not getting any sales from it. So all those traditional things, just please don't do them. They don't work. However, when I kept hearing the no's and I was implementing this sales process that everybody told me was supposed to be the thing that would work, I thought, oh, wow, okay, maybe this product isn't as good as what I was thinking it was. Maybe this isn't going to work out. Maybe I'm going to have to go back to my desk job, right? And you start to spiral and you start to have kind of all of these swirling thoughts about how your business is going to fail because nobody is saying yes. But I'm here to tell you today, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with your product. You are a great entrepreneur. If you have made it this far that you are sitting in this webinar today, you probably have a great product because you have worked very hard to perfect that product and make it as best as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with you or your product. Retailers say no for so many different reasons. So there was a tipping point where I started to ask the question, why? It takes a lot of courage to get to this point. It's not easy. And I get it, I know, because I've been there. But if you can ask why, it's going to give you so much information. So I started asking why, and these are some of the real reasons that retailers said to me. So first they said, I don't have the budget right now. So there was a chain of stores, health food stores that are fairly well known in this region that I was calling and trying to sell my product to. And I just happened, for whatever reason, I just happened to be calling them all at the end of the month. And they kept saying, no, no, no. And I thought, what's going on? This is a great product. And I think it's going to be a really good fit for their store. So why are they saying no? I don't understand. So eventually I got the courage. I asked the why question. And the person on the other end of the phone, he was like, oh, it's the end of the month. And honestly, I don't have the budget right now. But if you call back next week, I actually have a fresh budget next week. And I'll probably say yes to bring this in because it's a great product. Right? So this has nothing to do with your product not being good. It literally just has to do with the circumstance that the retailer is in at that exact point in time. I had another retailer say to me, I don't have shelf space. So there is in Toronto, in Leslieville, there is a small health food store that I know and love, and a lot of people know and love, and I really wanted to get into it. And so I went to that store, and with all my might, I sold this product. I was trying to sell this product to these two women that own the store. And they said no. And I was devastated because I so badly wanted to get into that store. But I thought, all right, well, I guess it's not going to happen. So I gave it about 6 months. And then I started thinking about that store again. And I thought, I feel like this product would do really well. I really want to get into the store. Let me go and try and approach them again. So I did. And when I reapproached them 6 months later, one of the owners of the store said, oh, I remember you and I remember your bars and they're so good. We didn't bring them in before because we're a small store and we support local. And literally, if we were to bring your product in, we would have had to delist someone else. And we didn't feel good about that because we didn't want to have to delist a local product, right? And kick someone out of our store. But right now, we actually happen to have some shelf space available. I would love to bring your product in, right? So another lesson is just because it's a no right now doesn't mean that it's a no for forever. I also had retailers say to me, I just brought in a very similar product. So if you are in a saturated category, if you're in a category where there are other people locally that are making products similar to yours, you might start to hear this a little bit. Because again, those producers are just like you, right? They're going to be out there pounding the pavement, trying to get their product into these stores. And so sometimes retailers would say, we just brought in this other product and we want to give it a fair shot before we bring in direct competition, right? And so that's totally fair. Again, that's a reapproach situation. Like, come back in a few months and we'll talk about it then. It's Christmas is one that used to drive me kind of nuts, because you will start hearing, oh, no, we're not bringing any products in because it's Christmas time. You'll start hearing that in like the early days of November. Like November 2nd, people will be like, oh, it's Christmas time. And you're like, it's November. But the reality is, again, these retailers know what products sell. They are savvy, right? They've been running their businesses for years now, and they know what sells and when it sells. And anytime in the lead up to Christmas, starting in early November, they're only bringing in things that are going to sell around the holidays, right? So cakes and cookies and sweets and chocolates and basically anything that people will either buy to bring to a Christmas party with them, or will put on their Christmas table, or will gift to somebody else for Christmas. But a health food product, if you have a health food product, you will likely hear this and you'll want to go back in January when people start their New Year's resolutions, right? So that'll be your time to shine. Now, all of that being said, these reasons that I've given you, there were so many others. These are just the 4 that I heard most often. Those reasons have nothing to do with you or your product. Now, there are times when retailers will say no because they don't like your product. That is going to happen. That is just reality. Your product is not for everyone, which means that not everybody will like it all of the time. But most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, when you hear no, it really has nothing to do with you or your product. So I get to this point where I'm trying to sell my product to all these retailers and they're all saying no. And I'm trying my absolute hardest to get them to say yes, and they're still saying no. And I get kind of to my wit's end, and I think I need to get some help on this because I clearly don't know what I'm doing. So I reached out to my sister. So my sister is like a world-class salesperson. She wins awards for her sales. She wins like all expenses paid trips for her sales. Like, she is very, very good at what she does. And I thought, if I'm going to talk to someone about sales, this is the person to talk to. So I sit down with my sister and I'm like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but like all these stores are saying no. And like, I'm probably only getting like a quarter of the stores that I talk to say yes. And so my sister was like, okay, let me get this straight. You are saying that you approach like 100 stores and you get like 25 of them to say yes. So like 25%. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, right? And she was like, no, that's a really good close rate in sales. If you're getting a quarter of the people you talk to say yes, that's phenomenal. That's amazing. As soon as she said it, a switch flipped for me. It flipped for me because I realized this is just the name of the game. This is just what it takes. So I'm not failing. I don't have a terrible product. I'm not a terrible entrepreneur. It literally is just what doing sales is like. And so basically what this means is that if you want to get 40 retailers, you will have to approach 160. Now, I know that this sounds kind of dire when you first hear it, right? You're like, oh, 160 retailers is a lot. It is a lot. It is a lot. And it is hard work doing this type of work for sure. But It's going to move a lot faster than what you think it is. If you can consistently and systematically do this process, if you want to get 40 retailers and you approach 10 per week, that basically means you're hitting your goal in just a few months. It's really not going to take that long to get you to where you want to be. Now, knowing this information, I also found to be really empowering for another reason. That reason is that you don't actually have to worry about each individual store. So I know in the early days when you are only approaching about 5 stores and all 5 stores say no, that feels really devastating, right? Because you're like, oh, but I really wanted to get into this one store, like the store in Toronto. I really, really wanted this one store to say yes. And when they say no, it can really be a pretty big blow to your ego and kind of make you feel like maybe this isn't going to work. But understanding that this is the sales process and that it really is, to a certain extent, a numbers game, knowing that can empower you, because now you don't have to worry about that one store saying yes. Because if they say no, there's going to be a whole bunch of stores after them that do say yes. And honestly, once you get those other stores, if you go back to that original store that you really wanted, you now have more credibility, and it's much more likely that they will say yes too. So this really is just the name of the game. And I'm going to help you today to implement a systematic process so that you can reach these goals fairly quickly. So let's talk about what this process actually looks like. So the first step is that I want you to create a big list of retailers for you to approach. The reason I want you to get a big list together of, at least 50 retailers is because I don't want you to be going back and forth constantly. That's a big waste of your time, and I know you guys are busy. So I don't want you to be finding a retailer, going out and approaching them, and then going back to the drawing board and trying to find another retailer. I want you to do this kind of all at once and find a whole bunch of retailers that would be suitable for your product. Now, this is the other piece. Suitable for your product is really, really, really important, because this process is a lot of work. And I know that you guys have a very limited amount of time to do this in. What we don't want you doing is approaching every single store under the sun, right? Because not every store is going to be a good fit for your product. And if you spend a whole bunch of time approaching stores that aren't a good fit, then what's going to happen is you're going to get that product into the store. It's not going to work. It's going to sit there and collect dust, and then it will have been wasted effort on your part. We don't want wasted effort. We want to really focus and hone this in onto the stores that we really think are going to work out. So here's how we do this. I want you to ask yourself 2 questions just to start off. The first question is, who is my target customer? I want you to know this really, really, really well. So I know we talk a lot about like demographics and what's your target market, right? And people will say, oh, my target market is, 18 to 60, really male and female, and into health and wellness. It's very vague, and it really encompasses the majority of the population. That's not what we want to do. We want to focus in on the specific subset of the population that is going to love your product more than anybody else, right? Because if we can focus on them, we can really make your product shine and create a very popular brand and get you moving very quickly. We don't want to waste our time with consumers that don't really care that much about our product, even if they could potentially like it. So who is your target customer? And then the second question is, where do they shop? Because if you think about this for a second, if your target customer is a 35-year-old health conscious mom, that person is shopping in a very different store than a 60-year-old grandfather that's about to retire, right? The 35-year-old health conscious mom might be going to Whole Foods and buying premium products at a premium price tag. A 60-year-old grandfather that's about to retire might be shopping more at like Walmart and Costco. They might be more price conscious because they know they have to live off their pension for the next however many years, right? You really want to make sure you know who your customer is, and then start thinking about what stores this person is going to be shopping in. Now, I want you to start out your list by just writing down right away, just write down a list of stores that you are currently aware of that you know your customer would shop in, right? So there's probably going to be somewhere between 5 and 10 stores that you can immediately be like, oh yes, okay, this store, yes, this store, definitely need to go to this one. You're going to be able to think of a few right off the hop. But you will hit a little bit of a ceiling when you get to about 10 stores is usually where I see the ceiling being hit, where people are like, I don't know of any other stores. And so how do I get a list of 50 retailers if I only know of 10? So here's how you break through that ceiling. If you want to find some more retailers, you want to ask yourself one more question. And that question is, what other products would my customer buy? So to give you an example of this, I had a whole food plant-based energy bar. And so I was thinking about products that were in the health food space. I was thinking about products that were in the plant-based space. And so in thinking about those products, I tried to think of small local producers of health food or plant-based products. And the reason I say you want to think of small local producers is because who we are going after right now is going to be the smaller, more independent boutique stores. Because you might want to get your product into Loblaws or Whole Foods or Costco or Walmart, but in order to get there, you need to have a roster of independent retailers under your belt first, right? This is a bit of a process. And just like the retailers, just like the distributors, Whole Foods wants to see credibility. And so you're probably not going to get Whole Foods as your first retailer. You might get Whole Foods as your 40th retailer or your 50th retailer, but it probably won't be your first. And so we want to be thinking about small local producers of these products because they're more likely to be selling to small local stores that would make sense for you to get into at this point in time. If you look at the really big brand names, their list of stores is probably going to be those big chain grocery stores, right? So that's not what we're looking for. So I'm thinking about health food products in my area, and I know of a local kombucha company. And so what I did was I went onto their website and I clicked on the link that says where to buy so I could pull up their list of stores, and I added those stores to my list. And then I was thinking about plant-based products. Okay, well, there's a local producer of vegan cheese in my area. So I went onto her website and clicked on where to buy and pulled that list and put all those stores on my list as well. So you're going to end up with a massive list. Now, what I want you to do is start to vet some of these stores before you approach them, because you don't want to be approaching, again, stores that don't make sense for your product. And just because these products are kind of in your category or in your space doesn't mean that all the stores they sell to will make sense for you. So for instance, the kombucha company was selling to some restaurants as well, right? Because they would have kombucha on tap that customers could buy when they came into the restaurant. So I was like, an energy bar is probably not going to work in a restaurant. So I took those right off my list, right? There were some stores too where I just felt like it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right customer base, and so those stores came off as well. You really want to whittle it down so that you have only stores on your list that make sense for your customer and for your product. Now, once you have that list, what we're going to do is outreach to these retailers. So you want to kind of group them by region because you will be going out in person to meet with these retailers. Remember, it's all about building relationships, right? So you really want to group them geographically. So you might say, I'm going to, call 10 stores within this region. So group those 10 stores together. Now, the first thing that I want to say here is that emails do not work. So we all start out by sending emails. You are not alone in this. I did this too. And if you have sent emails out as a cold sales outreach, you probably have experienced that they don't work. And there's a couple reasons why they're not really great to be doing. So the first reason is because, again, these retailers are just like you. They're just like me. Think about how busy you guys are, right? You do not have the time to respond to every single email that comes through your inbox. I have a friend that has like 2,000 unread emails in her inbox. She runs a retail store and she confided in me about this. And she said, honestly, Nicole, I'm never answering these emails. because she doesn't have the time, right? And so when she goes into her inbox, she prioritizes based on what needs to be responded to, what's super important, what's super urgent, right? But a cold sales email from someone she doesn't know and has never heard of does not go to the top of her list. So emails are really easy to get ignored. They're really easy to delete. If you've ever had a cold DM on LinkedIn is getting really bad for this, or on Instagram or any other social media platform, or if you've had a cold sales email before, you know how you respond to it, and they are the same as you. They're very busy and they're probably not going to respond. The other reason emails are not great is because you can't really build a relationship with someone over email. You really want to be conversing with them, right? And emails are very transactional. It's like, here's my ask, they'll get back to you potentially and say, here are my questions, you get back to them, here are the answers. It's very transactional, one-to-one. When you're having a conversation with someone over the phone, that is a much better way to build a relationship, because you can really dive in and have a conversation with that person. So what I want you to do is not email them. I want you to pick up the phone and call them instead. Now, I know that this is super intimidating. I get it, but don't worry, we're not telemarketers. We're not here to try and sell people stuff over the phone. That's not what we're in the business of doing. The goal here is to just get an in-person meeting. And so what I want you to do when you pick up the phone, I want you to introduce yourself and tell them a bit about your product. So remember that value proposition we talked about? This is your opportunity to pull that out and make it shine, right? Then I want you to ask them if you can stop by with some samples. Samples are amazing in the food industry. It is such a great way to get your foot in the door, because everybody loves free food, right? Like, who doesn't love being offered free food? Everybody loves it. And so it is a great way to get people to say yes to an in-person meeting if you can offer a sample. And I know that it is a bit of a financial investment, but I promise you, you will make that money back in sales. Retailers will be very hesitant to bring your product into their store if they haven't yet tried it. They really do want to try it before they buy it. This applies to retailers, it applies to direct customer sales as well, but you really do have to be sampling your product. Now, I want you to give them a specific day that you are going to come out and talk to them, because what this allows you to do is offer up a certain day, and then they have the opportunity to say, oh, I actually won't be in that day. You want to make sure that you are talking to the decision maker. There's nothing worse than having someone say, oh, sure, no problem, I'll just pass these samples along to him, because you don't have the opportunity to build a relationship with that person now. Literally, the only interaction they're having with your brand is just these samples, and that's it. You want them to be interacting with you. It's just as much about you as a person, as an entrepreneur, expressing your passion, telling them your story, and getting them to know, like, and trust you. It's as much about that as it is about you having a good product. It's both. And so you really want to make sure that you get in front of the right person. So you can say, I'm going to be in your area of town on Thursday. Would you mind if I stop by with some samples? And then they can say, yeah, Thursday's great. If you could come by, late afternoon, that'll be the best time for me. Or they could say Friday doesn't work. Could you come by? Or Thursday doesn't work. Could you come by on Friday? It really gives an opportunity there to make sure you're connecting with the right person. Now, again, I get that this is terrifying. Having to pick up the phone and cold call people is not easy for most of us. And I promise you, it was not easy for me either. The poor person on the other end of the phone with my first sales call, I'm sure they knew that I was anxious, because my voice was shaking. Like, I'm sure they could tell in the background, like, I'm sweaty, like my hands were shaking, like it was bad. It was bad. But you have to start somewhere. And this is where we all start. It needs to be done for the growth of your business. It just is something that it sucks, and you have to do it, and it needs to get done. So what I would suggest you do is commit to outreaching to a certain number of retailers every single week. This is what I did to get me over that hump. Because when you have anything that's big and scary in your business, whether it's a sales phone call or anything else, You will find a million other things to do than this thing, right? You will be like, I haven't posted to social media for a couple days. Maybe I should spend 2 hours crafting a post. My bookkeeping is really behind. I really got to get on top of that and input my, receipts into QuickBooks. Like, you will find anything that you can do to avoid having to do this thing, or at least I did. And so if you commit to saying, I will outreach to 10 retailers on Wednesday every single week, Wednesday at 1 p.m., that is my time. I am going to make these calls. And even if you have to do it as like a ripping of a Band-Aid, and just say, I'm going to make these 10 calls. I'm going to get through it as quickly as possible. And then once I'm done for the week, and I don't have to think about it again for another week. That can be a really great way to ensure that you do this, because now you've committed to it. It's in your agenda. It's going to make it a lot harder to ignore that commitment. Okay, so your in-person meeting. If it's possible, this is even more scary than picking up the phone and doing a cold sales outreach. Because now, as we were talking about at the break, you are now in front of this other human being, right? And they could ask you anything, and you have to be prepared with those answers, which is why we went through in the last section of the presentation all the questions that they're either going to ask you or be thinking about when you meet with them. Now, I do want to say that this is a casual meeting. I have had clients in the past that have thought, I went out and bought my business suit, and I've got my portfolio full of spreadsheets, and I've got my pitch deck on a USB, and I'm going to go in and just blow it out of the water. It's not Dragon's Den. It is just a casual meeting with another human being is all it is. You're going to go in, you're going to have some conversation, you're going to leave them with some product, and you're going to leave. And that's basically all it is. So if you can think about it too, just as a side note, if you're able to stop thinking about it as, I'm going to go and have a meeting with X retailer, and start thinking about it as, I'm going to go have a chat with Joe, that's going to make it a lot less intimidating. That actually helped me very significantly in the early days, was thinking about it as like, this actually isn't a big deal. I'm just going and having a chat with another human being about a product that I make and I love, and I know they're going to love it too. And that's it. So you want to keep this meeting to about 20 minutes max, because you are kind of interrupting their day when you go in with your product. So you don't want to overstay your welcome, but you do want to make sure you slow down and give that meeting enough time to get across all the things that you want to get across. I know that because we're nervous, it can be really easy to kind of psych yourself up outside of the store and then kind of run in and hand them their product and then run out of the store and make it very quick and try and get through it as quickly as possible. But I want you to not do that. Do whatever you need to do to like take some deep breaths and slow yourself down, even slow down the pace at which you're speaking, because it will make you seem more confident. So I want you to slow down. I want you to focus on, again, relationship building. So you want to make some small talk with this retailer. You want to ask them about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. And so if you ask them any questions about like, oh, when did you open this store? I know this is a new location. When did you move into this location? How's it going here? How's your day been? How's your week been? Ask them about themselves. It's really going to start to warm them up and help them open up to you. Now, after you make your small talk, there will be a point where it makes sense to transition into talking about the reason you came, right? Which is to sell your product to them. And so you want to hand them your samples that you're bringing with you. You want to hand them your partner package or your sell sheet. And you want to bring with you a display case if your product is sitting in a display case. So energy bars do sit in a display case in store. And so I got into the habit of bringing them with me, because retailers literally will look at your display case and decide how much shelf space they have for this product in order to decide how much they can bring into their store. And so I would have retailers literally, I would hand them the samples and the partner package inside of the display case. They would take it and they would say, okay, I think I have room over here on this shelf. And so I have room for like 1, three flavors. Okay, what are your 3 most popular flavors? So do keep that in mind as well, that is another question they might ask you, is what are your most popular flavors? Because they want to bring in the ones that are more guaranteed to sell as well, right? So do bring that in with you. Tell them some of the basics about your product, right? You want to tell them the wholesale price, the SRP, the MOQ, all of those acronyms, and answer any questions that they have. And then at the end of this meeting, when it feels like, okay, we're at the end, naturally, this has kind of run its course, I should make my leave. You want to tell them that you are going to reach back out in about a week to see what they thought of your product. This is so key to be doing this. I told you guys I was going to tell you the one thing that you can do to significantly improve your sales, and this is it. I was not doing this at first. I was not doing follow-up calls at all. And in fact, I really thought that if I left the product with these retailers and they liked it, of course they would call me, right? Because if they like it and they want to bring it into their store, they're going to contact me for the order. I have all the order information in my partner package. I've got an email, I've got a phone number, I've got a website, I've got my social media. They know how to get in touch with me if they actually want this product. And so when the phone didn't ring and I didn't receive any emails, I thought, they must not like it. They must not like the product. Maybe this isn't working. And so it took me a little while of kind of sitting on my hands and thinking like, what am I going to do? Am I going to go back to my corporate job? What's going to happen? Until I finally realized I am waiting for them to call me. What if I just pick up the phone and call them? Like, worst case scenario, they tell me they hated it. And I get some good feedback, right? Again, asking that why when you hear a no is going to give you incredible feedback about your business, about your product, about the reasons that retailers might be saying no. And so I thought, I have to do this. It sucks, it's not fun, but I have to do this. And so I picked up the phone and I called some of the retailers that I had approached the week before, because I figured, a week should be more than enough time to try this product. And I thought, these people are for sure going to turn me down. This is going to be awful. They're going to hang up on me. I'm annoying them. It's so bad. But I did it anyways. And I called. And the first person I talked to was like, oh, yes, the energy bars. Oh my gosh. I loved these bars. We need to bring these in. I totally forgot to call you. Can I place an order with you right now? And phone call after phone call after phone call, I kept hearing the same thing over and over and over again. We forgot to call you. We got busy. We forgot to try the samples was sometimes what I heard as well. Sometimes they were like, I have them sitting on my desk right here. Totally forgot about this. Let me just try this while I'm on the phone with you, which is super intimidating also, but it usually went quite well. But typically, they just are so busy that they forget about it. You calling is that reminder, that push that they need to be like, oh yes, actually this product is great. Do you want to bring it in? How can we order? What's your minimum order? Like, let's go, let's do this. I think it's really important to know that you're not bothering them. If you can reframe this as, oh, if I call them, I'm being really pushy and annoying, and you can switch that thinking and think instead, you are helping a fellow entrepreneur put food on their table. Because if they like your product and they think it's going to sell in their store, but they literally have just forgotten about it or don't have the time to pick up the phone and make that call, then they are missing out on dollars that could be going into their bank account, dollars that could help them take their kids on vacation. And by you calling them, you are helping them achieve those goals, right? Now, if they say no, that's okay too. That's totally their prerogative. You don't have to be salesy or pushy. I am never going to tell you to overcome objections. We're not in the game of doing that. We are going to respect the decision that the retailers make. Because again, put yourself in their shoes. You've had people call you on the telephone and try and get you to buy things before. And if you say no, it's because you know that it's not the right fit for you. It's because you know that it's not the right fit for your store or for your life or whatever it is. And then trying to push it on you doesn't usually change your answer, right? Like, you already have your answer. You already know that it's a no. And so we're not trying to be salesy. We're not trying to be pushy. If somebody says no, you can respect their decision. because they know what's best for their store. You can thank them for their time. You can get off the phone and pick up the phone and call somebody who is much more likely to be a yes, right? Chase those yeses. That is the most effective use of your time. Trying to turn a no into a yes is not an effective use of your time. It's going to take a lot longer and be a lot harder and be a lot less successful than it is to just keep chasing those yeses. Okay, so before we move on though, I do want to talk to you guys about some incentives that you can offer to these retailers. So when I first got started in selling this product to retailers, I had really kind of built myself up or gotten myself ready for this idea that there was going to be a negotiation. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs do this, where before they approach any stores, they feel like they have to have all of their negotiation numbers perfect. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go in at this number, and then they'll come back probably around here, and then I'll come back around here, and there's going to be this like big negotiation that happens. And I felt like I had to be 100% ready for that negotiation before I picked up the phone and followed up with anybody. And what I found was so surprising to me, because nobody wanted to negotiate. Nobody wanted to negotiate. And I felt like at that point, I felt ready for it. So I was kind of disappointed that no one wanted to negotiate. But if you think about this for a second, negotiation is so awkward and so hard for everybody, including the retailer. Nobody wants to negotiate. It is very awkward for most people to have to ask people to sell their product at a lower rate than what they've come in at, right? So most people will not negotiate with you. But what you will probably hear them say is something like, yeah, I loved the product. So good, so great. I think it would do great in the store, but I'm just not, I don't know. There's something holding me back. I'm not really sure. You're going to hear a slight tone of hesitation that you have to pick up on, because this is your opportunity for negotiation. This is them saying to you that they need a little bit something extra to help them de-risk or lower the risk of this deal for them. And so if you hear that hesitation in their voice, there are a few things that you can offer. So the first is a free fill. A free fill is standard in this industry. If you don't know what it is yet, hang on, because it's a little bit jarring when you hear about it, but it is standard, and you might actually get outright asked for free fills. So a free fill is when you give the retailer one case of each SKU of your product for free as their first order. So they do not pay for their first order. And if you have 6 SKUs like I did, then that is 6 cases for free. It's a lot of money. It's a big investment, right? And so it is standard across the industry. People will expect this from you. And so what we want to do is make sure that that investment, if you choose to make it, because sometimes it really does not make sense to do a free fill, you want to make sure that that retailer is for sure a great retailer that you think has your customer base, you think the product is going to do really, really well in. Or if they have multiple stores, it can be a great bargaining chip, because you can say, I will absolutely do a free fill for you, but only if you put me into all 3 stores or all 10 stores or whatever it is, right? Because now, instead of giving away 6 cases of product for free to 1 store, you're giving away 6 cases of product for free. And in return for that, you're getting 10 stores. So that really makes the investment a lot more worth it. So you want to make sure that, first of all, a free fill is worth it. Do not offer it to everybody because it is very cash intensive. But if you do offer it, I always suggest you follow up a free fill with a demo. So a demo is when you go to the retail store that you've just given product to, or sometimes you've sold product to them, and you go in on a day of the week where it's really busy, like a Saturday. You ask them what their busiest time of day is, and you go in for usually about 2 to 3 hours. You bring a small little like 2-foot pop-up table, and you provide free samples to their customers in an effort to get the customers eating the product, loving the product, and buying the product. Because what you want if you do a free fill is a second order, right? You want to have that initial free order be followed by a paid order and then more paid orders after that to make the investment worth it. And so in order to do that, you really, really, really want to get that product moving off those shelves, get that free product out of that store and backfill it with paid product. So you want to go in, you want to do the demo. When you do a demo, whether it's with a free fill or not, what I want you to do is bring additional product with you. Because what's probably going to happen when you demo is people are going to try the product, they're going to love it, they're going to buy the product off the store shelf. And at the end of those 2 or 3 hours, you will notice that a few of your flavors are low. And so what you can do is then go to the manager or the store owner, whoever the decision maker is, and say, hey, the demo went very well, sold a ton of your product, but I noticed that you're actually really low now on peanut butter and you only have 1 almond cranberry left. Do you want me to backfill that now while I'm here? I have product with me. That is a great way to get your second order on the spot and get them paying you in addition to that pre-fill. You can also offer a guaranteed sale. So I actually loved a guaranteed sale as an incentive for a few reasons. So a guaranteed sale means that you sell the product to the retailer and they basically say, if your product expires before we can sell it, you are guaranteeing that you will buy it back from us. And so that completely de-risks this entire transaction for them, right? Because they're basically saying, we'll like float the money up front and we will buy this product from you. But if it doesn't sell, we don't want to be out that money. So if you could buy it back from us, that would be great. Here's the reason a guaranteed sale is better than a free fill. So if you have a reasonable shelf life, right? So if you have like, let's say 6 months, by the end of those 6 months, that retailer is probably not going to remember that you agreed to a guaranteed sale. Because when they ask you for a guaranteed sale, they're not, for the most part, these retailers are really not trying to, take more money from you and put you in a negative situation. They're asking for these things because they just want to see that you're flexible. They just want to see that if something was to go wrong and the product was to not work out for whatever reason, that you would be flexible in working with them to find an effective solution. Most of the time, these retailers do not want to put you in a bad position. And so most of the time, they're not going to, come knocking on your door, tapping on your shoulder saying, hey, you owe us a bunch of money because you agreed to a guaranteed sale in the first place. Most of them are not going to do that. I only had one retailer ever take me up on a guaranteed sale during the entire duration of running my business. And it was for like 5 energy bars. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll buy back these 5 energy bars. That's not very much money. And so a guaranteed sale can really be a great way to show the retailers that you're flexible to work with them without having to make such a massive investment on a free fill. Another thing you can offer is an intro deal. So this is a great way to, again, sidestep a free fill. So if somebody asks you for a free fill and you feel like, I don't know if it's worth the investment, you can say to them, we are still a relatively small local producer. And so we can't unfortunately do a free fill, but we are more than happy to offer you an intro deal. And so an intro deal is typically for the small retailers, it's usually about 10 to 15% off of the cost of their initial order. So their first order, they get kind of a sale on, and then every order after that is full price. One thing I will say, I had retailers ask me to just lower my price overall, or to, lower like the SRP, like all these different things. Do not permanently lower your price for any retailer. You offer your price for a reason. You need to make your margin too. And if you start just randomly lowering your price for anyone who asks for a lower price, like permanently, that's going to cause issues with your ability to make a living, with your ability to cover your overhead costs, with your ability to make a decent margin, which is then going to affect your ability to grow this business. And so you really want to be careful to not do that. But what you can do instead is offer a bit of a sale on their first order. it's usually enough that they can again see that you're flexible, you're willing to work with them, you're willing to give them a little bit of something in order to sweeten that deal. And they are much more inclined to say yes when you do that. Okay, so we are at the end of this second session here. So I'm going to stop sharing again, and then we can take some questions. And then we might do just a little bit of a break just so that we can grab water or coffee or whatever it is before we come back and finish off. Okay, so just looking for some questions here. Okay, so Nora's asking, how do retailers typically allocate budget throughout the month and seasons? Is there a sweet spot time to try and approach them? So yeah, this is kind of a multifaceted question. So yes and no. So it really depends on your product, because if you, again, like if you have a health food product, for instance, your best quarter of every year is going to be the first quarter, because everybody is going on their New Year's resolutions, right? So it's going to be January, February, March, maybe sometimes into April, people are looking to buy some health food. And then everything else is going to kind of like slowly dip down a little bit until you hit that last quarter of the year, which will be your lowest sales. And so really, if you have a health food product, your best time to be approaching stores is going to be early in January, right? It just depends on, it depends on your product. It depends on your category. In terms of budget though, typically budgets are best at the beginning of a quarter. And so if you can hit retailers at the beginning of a quarter when they have a fresh budget and they haven't allocated funds to anything yet, and you're right there saying, I have this product that's going to change your life and your customers' lives, and it's going to sell and it's going to do really well, they're going to be like, yeah, sure, $150. I might as well try it out. I have all of this budget available to me right now. Let's try this and bring this in. If you're approaching them at the end of a quarter or at the end of a month, it's going to be a lot harder for sure. Okay, so Benjamin is asking, I might have missed it, but how do you end up getting the phone number? Okay, yes. So Google's going to become your very best friend as an entrepreneur, because Google has all the answers to not everything, but a lot of things. And so literally what you're going to do is you're going to have your list of stores. You're going to Google search that store. You're going to find the phone number of that store, and you're going to find the address where you're going to go when you go in person. You can go onto their website and kind of do a little look around and see if this does actually look like a good fit for your product. You could also go onto their social media accounts as well and take a look to see if you think that their audience on social media kind of connects with the audience you're looking for your product. So do a little bit of kind of digging and research. This gets, I will say, it gets a lot harder as you get into the larger retailers. So small retailers, you can literally just do the Google search and find the retail store and call and ask for the store owner if it's a really small store, or the store manager if it's a larger store. But the bigger guys, like, you're gonna have to really creep sometimes. I remember when I was trying to get into Sobeys, and someone had told me, this is the person you need to talk to at Sobeys. And I was like, great, how do I contact them? How do I call them? How do I email them? And it literally took me finding that person on LinkedIn, messaging them on LinkedIn. They didn't respond. I don't think they even saw the message. And then I Google searched the person's name, Sobeys, email address. And sometimes you don't find their actual email, but you can find what the format is of that store. So some stores are like first name dot last name. Some stores are first initial last name. Some stores would be like last name dot, first name, whatever it is, the format. And then you can reverse engineer it and try sending them an email based on what that format is. So that worked really well for me for getting in touch with the person at Sobeys. She would hate me for telling you that, but it works. It works very well. So you're gonna have to do a lot of kind of your own digging and research to find that information. Do we have any other questions? No? Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned that once the store or the buyer says no to your offering or to your products, to carry their products, do you find that maybe approaching them again, like you said, like 3 months later or something like that, is okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is it okay, but I would highly encourage you to do it, because their situation might have changed, right? Again, the main reasons that these retailers say no, it's not because they hated your product or they didn't think it would be a good fit for their store. Most of the time they're saying no because they don't have the budget, they don't have the shelf space, they just brought in a different product. So there's all sorts of reasons that might change as time goes on. And so if you reapproach those stores, 3 months out, 4 months out, 6 months out, and see again, like, we talked a few months ago and I didn't hear back from you, but I really think this product would do really well in this store. I wanted to come by and leave you with some more samples and maybe just talk about whether or not you think this is a good fit. I think that would be a great way to approach it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Do we want to take a quick break? Do we need to get up from our chairs? Yes, no, yes, thumbs up, yes, no? Seems like people are okay. If everybody's okay to keep going, I'm okay to keep going too. Okay, let me just pull up the next portion. Okay to keep going. Amazing. Thank you, Georgette. All right, let's do this. Okay, so let's talk then about supporting sales in store and growing your business. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is working with distributors. Distributors get such a bad rep in this industry, and there are reasons for that, but I want to help you guys reframe your relationship with distributors. Because if you have a great relationship with them, they can be super helpful in helping you grow your business. And there is a right time to approach them when it makes sense for your business as well. So we're going to talk about all of that. Then we're going to talk about supporting your product in store. So you've probably heard this before. If you haven't, you will hear it soon, I'm sure. But getting listed is only half the battle. You have to stay listed. That is honestly the hardest part, is staying listed. Once you get into these stores, you have to get your product turning over so that the retailers can see that it is working. And there are very specific things that you can do to make it much more likely that your product sells. So I'm going to go over all of those with you guys. We're then going to briefly talk about getting into grocery stores, because I know that this is kind of the gold standard in this industry, is to get into grocery. Most people I work with and talk to really want to get into grocery stores. That is kind of their main goal that they are working towards. So I'm going to tell you the 4 main pathways to getting into grocery and what they look like. And then we're going to round it out by talking about some key factors that will support your growth in your business. Before I move on, I have to point out that this is a photo of me, a very old photo of me, at my very first demo at a store called Quartermaster here in London. It's a health food store. And so you can see it's all very grassroots. I have my product in like a poly package. For those of you who are looking at packaging right now, it's a poly bag that I had it in a pouch. I was making the labels in-house and doing the peel and stick action that we all do. You can see there's a cardboard box on the table. Like, this is where I started. And honestly, guys, this is where we all start. So please remember that if this is your starting point, you are not alone. This is where everybody starts in this industry, and you can grow it and you can do what I did. Literally, it's available to you as well. I'm not different than you guys. I started out in the same way as you. So I just wanted to show you guys that because I love this photo. I love looking back on that time. Okay, let's talk about working with distributors. So this was one of the questions in the chat, is do you approach these stores direct, or do you approach them through a distributor? So as you start getting all these stores directly and you start to expand, you're going to hit a tipping point, probably 40 or 50 stores in, where retailers will start asking you, who can we order from, or who is your distributor? I remember hearing this for the first time, and I remember saying to that retailer, oh, no, you can order it from me. Like, I'll just sell it to you direct. We don't need to go through a middleman. We don't need a distributor. And they actually said, we cannot bring it in direct. We only order through distributors. Excuse me. So if you again think about the retailer, it is super challenging for these retailers to order direct from each and every vendor that they have in their store, right? If you're talking about a small store that's going to be hundreds of products, a larger store is thousands, there's no way that they can run their business, be an employer and lead a team of people, do their bookkeeping, do all the things that you guys are also doing, and also keep an eye on their inventory and know exactly when to restock it and pick up the phone and reach out to you at that exact moment. Like, it's not possible. It's too much for these retailers. And so instead of doing that, what they tend to do is order everything from 2 or 3 distributors that have the products that they want to bring into their store. Now, again, distributors get such a bad rep in this industry. And honestly, I'm no different. Like, I thought the same thing. I thought I'm never going to work with a distributor. I remember being in a food workshop, not totally dissimilar to this one today that you guys are in. And the person, we were talking about margins, and the person had said, you need to keep enough margin to work with retailers, to work with distributors, to work with brokers as you grow. And so if you're starting with a 20% margin, it's not enough, right? You need to have a 50 or 60% margin in order to make way for all of these middlemen. And I remember thinking, middlemen, I'm not going to bring a distributor. Like, why would I work with a distributor when I literally can just sell direct to stores? But the reality is, you do need to work with them in this industry in order to effectively grow. If your goal is to get into large grocery store chains, or even to really expand significantly with independent boutique retailers, you will have to eventually work with a distributor. Now, the distributor also gets a bad rap because they take a cut of your margin, right? They take some of your money. And it is true, the distributor does need to make money, but you are getting something in return for that, right? You are essentially paying for the service that they offer because you want to get your product into the retail stores that they service. You are essentially paying them for that service. So it really can be a mutually beneficial relationship where you're both getting something that you want out of the relationship. So again, you want to start talking to the distributors once you have a roster of stores under your belt to have that credibility piece, right? They want to see that your product is going to sell. Now, again, the producer, you guys, you want to get your product into the stores, the distributor services. Now, the distributor actually wants 2 things. Most people know that they want a margin on the sale of your products, but what most people don't realize is that in order for the distributor business model to work, they actually really need to get their product lines into more stores. So in the food industry, we talk about the fact that we all operate on razor thin margins. And this is true, we do. We operate on very, very thin margins. But the distributors, if you can believe it, actually operate on a much smaller margin than us. They are usually making cents on the sale of your products, not dollars, usually it's cents. And so what that means is they have to get volume of sales. They have to sell a whole lot of product just to keep their lights on, just to be able to afford their overhead costs and pay their staff and put food on their table, right? But the problem is that there's only so many products you can sell to any one store before the store's like, I can't take any more products from you, right? And so if the distributor really wants to get volume and keep their lights on, they have to sell their product lines to a ton of stores. So this is the thing that really surprises most people with distributors, is that they actually want to take over some of your retailer accounts. And I know that that can be a little bit upsetting at first because you have just worked your butt off to get all these stores, and now you're having to hand over some of these stores to the distributors, and you're not going to make as big of a margin. And I had the same thought process as well. But again, this can be a mutually beneficial relationship. So the first distributor that I got listed with, I was going to say spoke to, but that's not true. The first distributor that said yes, they actually sat down with me, and I didn't really know what to expect, what they were going to ask for. And so we talked margin a little bit, and then they kind of dove in. I could tell they were getting to what it was they really, really wanted to ask me about. And they said, we see that your product is in this one store over here. And we have been trying so very hard to get our product lines into this store for years, and they will not give us the time of day. Will you give us this store? And I thought about it for a second, and my initial response internally was no, I'm not going to give you that store. But I thought about it for a second, and I thought, they have stores that I know for a fact I can't get into on my own. And there's 3 stores in particular that I really, really want to get into. They're relatively big name stores, and I think they could help me with this. So I said to them, I will give you that store if you guys can get me into these 3 other stores over here that I really want. And they said, it's a deal, because they wanted that store so badly. And so you can really use this as a bit of a bargaining chip in your negotiations with these distributors. And like it did for me, it can really work in your favor, because you're giving up 1 store to get 3. And they made good on that promise. They did get me into those 3 stores. So you can use that as a bargaining chip. You can have it work in your favor. Now, the distributors also want 18 to 22% margin on your wholesale price. So it's not usually as much money as what you are thinking it's going to be, because it's not a margin on your SRP, it's a margin on the wholesale price. And so if you think about this, if you want to land at about 20%, which is usually what I suggest you go in at, if you want to land at 20%, well, 20% of your wholesale price is really not very much money that you're giving up for each and every product that they sell for you, right? So this can actually be a really good deal for you. Now, again, like any other things in your business, this is always just going to be a balancing act. You have to make sure that working with the distributor works for them, but it also works for you. Don't just work with any old distributor. Make sure that it is a good fit before you sign that contract. Because even though getting into these smaller retailers, you're typically not signing contracts. It's usually kind of more of an understanding or a handshake deal. Distributors, you are actually signing contracts, and you do want to make sure you read through all the fine print and know what you're signing before you sign it. So on that note, there are a few things that you really need to know before you start working with distributors. So distributors, most people think about them as literally being a distributor, distributing your product to the stores. But what they can do for you, if they have a great sales team, is they can sell your product to these stores. And there is a difference, right? Distributing is just kind of backfilling orders and stuff like that. Selling is getting your product into that store. Now, some distributors will tell you that they have a good sales team, and they don't. The people are really just there to kind of backfill orders, and you still have to go out and do the boots on the ground sales. That's not the kind of distributor you want to work with. You want to work with someone who actually has a great sales team. And before you sign that contract, you want to make sure you go to their office and you meet with their sales team and you talk to them about what their sales process is. This is going to help you verify that they actually do have a good sales team that's going to go out and sell your product to these stores. Another thing to know is that they may ask for a guaranteed sale, and in this case, they will take you up on it. They're not going to forget. They're not just asking you to be flexible. They know that their margins are super tight, and if they have a whole bunch of products sitting in their warehouse that's not selling, they need to get their money back on it. So if you agree to a guaranteed sale, know that that is a real thing in this situation. MCBs are totally standard across the industry with distributors, and this is another acronym that you don't know until you know. So an MCB is a manufacturer chargeback. So what this means is when you guys are going out and doing boots on the ground sales to these retailers yourself, you are bringing with you maybe 1 or 2 products as samples and leaving those samples there for them to try and make a decision whether they want to bring in your product or not. When a distributor does it, they will bring a case or 2 of your product. And the distributor does not foot the bill for that. They actually push it back to you. And so you will be paying for that free product, those free samples. Now, what they will do, the reason it's called a charge back, is because if you invoice them out, let's say $2,000, and they've handed out $200 of free product, they will actually pay $1,800 of that invoice, and they'll charge you back for that $200. I remember the first time this happened to me, and I was like, you guys paid the invoice, but not all of it. And they were like, yes, those are the MCVs. So another thing to keep in mind is to talk to them about how they handle MCVs. Distributors don't love this, but I would suggest that you talk to them upfront about the fact that you need to know and approve of MCVs in advance of them doing it. Because if you have to approve for each and every one, then you can keep track of your own expenses, and it's not going to be kind of a surprise bill at the end of the month, right? Promo calendars are normal as well. So a promo calendar is when you put your product on sale on a regular basis in an effort to get the stores more interested in buying your product, right? Everybody loves a sale. And so if the retailers see there's a sale on your product, they'll be more inclined to bring it in for the first time and try it and see how it goes. And so typically a promo calendar is once a quarter, you're going to put your product on sale. And then also just keeping in mind that free fills, demos, and intro deals are all super standard in this industry through distributors as well. So they will ask for these things too. Okay, so let's talk about supporting your product in store. And I know we're getting a bit closer to the end of our time. So I might go through the next few slides fairly quickly so that we have some time for some questions at the end. So there are multiple ways to support your product in store. The best way to get your product moving off store shelves is to do a demo. It's the best way because it gets your product into the customer's mouths and it gets them trying it, loving it, buying it, and then they're going to become a loyal customer of your product. Second, maybe even tying for first, is product placement. So if your product is on a bottom shelf at the back of the store, no one is going to see it, no one's going to buy it because they don't know it's there, right? You really want your product to be front and center where people can see it. If they can't see it, they won't buy it. So what you're looking to do is get your products either on an end cap would be great. So this is like when you go from one aisle into the next, that end of the aisle where you see product displays, that is a really great place to have your product because people pay attention to it. If you have a grab and go product, something that people could buy on impulse, a really great placement is at the cash register or close to the cash register. I had a retailer in the early days that had my product in like a very weird section of, it was in like the bakery section and it was an energy. So it wasn't even in with the other energy bars. And it was on a bottom shelf. You couldn't see it. It was in a weird area and I was getting no sales. And so I went and I talked to the manager and said, can we please move this? It required a little bit of negotiating, a little bit of talking to him. Eventually he said yes. And they moved it to an end cap right near the registers where people were lining up and it was at the express lane. The second they moved that product there, I started selling 10 cases of my product per week at that store. That's 120 energy bars that I was moving in one store in a week. That's unheard of in the energy bar space. Product placement can make or break your sales. So definitely make sure you get good product placement. Two other things that can help, but I would say they're definitely much lower on the list, is running ads in flyers and doing in-store promos. So store flyers, when you see a product promoted in a store flyer, that spot in that flyer has been paid for. And sometimes it can cost quite a bit of money. So make sure you know how much it is up front. and make sure you know what you're getting from that deal in advance. Is it running in the flyer for 1 week? Is it running in the flyer for multiple weeks? Is it just the paper flyer? Is it done online as well? Do they have any email promotions that go along with it, or social media promotions? You really want to make sure you know what you're getting before you commit to a flyer. In-store promos is just putting your product on sale at the shelf level in store. It can sometimes work if you have a price-conscious consumer. Sometimes it doesn't work because the thing that's holding people back is actually trying your product, which is why demos are so great. I think it's also really an important thing to note here that there will be some stores that just don't work. For whatever reason, they just don't work out. You thought it was a good fit, you thought they had the customer base, and you've tried to demo, you've tried product placement, you've tried everything you can think of, and the product just isn't moving. That's going to happen, and it's totally normal. So just keep that in mind when you are going through this process. Okay, so I promised that I would tell you the 4 main ways to get into grocery stores. So these are the 4 ways. The first is at the store level. So you're not really supposed to be doing this, but some stores are franchised. So if you see a Mark's No Frills, right? That is, Mark owns that No Frills. He's a franchise owner, right? No Frills is the corporation and Mark owns that particular store. If you approach a franchise, they are really only supposed to be bringing in products that are listed with the head office of that grocery store. But sometimes those franchise owners will say, well, it is my store and I think this is a great product, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it in. So sometimes you can get in at the store level. I think though you do have to keep in mind that if head office visits that store and they see your product and they know it's not an approved product, you can get booted from that store at any time. So something to keep in mind there. A better way to go, in my opinion, is local vendor programs. These are fantastic. Sobeys has a great local vendor program. And Loblaw has just started doing a local vendor program over the duration of COVID. I'm not sure when it started, but it was during COVID for sure. Basically, what a local vendor program is the grocery store says, we know how hard it is for local small producers to get into our grocery store chain. We get it, it's very hard, it's very competitive. So what we want to do is support those local producers in any way we can. And so they've created literally these programs and have employed people to basically deliver on these programs to support local producers like yourself. And so if you can get listed on a local vendor program, you will get a list of local stores that you can go and approach and sell your product to. So they don't automatically just put your product in store. You will have to go do that boots on the ground sales still. But now you're an officially listed product with this organization. So these local stores can officially bring your product in. There's no shady, like under the scenes kind of stuff going on. And so this can be a really great way to get your foot in the door. And if your sales do really, really well, they will expand you nationally as well. I've seen this happen with other producers. Another way to get in is through head office. This is the hardest way to get into grocery stores. It is what we all think of. When we all think about approaching grocery stores, we think about talking to the buyer for that category at their head office. And it is the absolute hardest way to get into grocery because these buyers are approached every day, every week by hundreds, if not thousands of producers. And they have to whittle those down to a handful of selected products that are actually going to make it onto store shelves. It's very, very, very competitive to go this route. And so I would suggest you go through a local vendor program first before you try the head office route. The last way is through national distributors. Now, it is not easy to get listed with a national distributor, but it is easier to get into grocery stores through a national distributor than it is through their head office. So just like the small independent retailers, grocery stores, even more so, have to order from distributors. There is no way that they are ordering from individual vendors for each product they have in these stores, right? It's not possible for them. And so what they do is they order from a handful of distributors that can supply their stores on a national level. And so if you're able to get listed with one of these national distributors, it makes it so much easier to get into these stores, because now you can go and have a meeting with the buyer through your distributor, and they will look at it and say, oh, this is going to be a much easier thing to say yes to because they already have distribution. We don't have to say yes to this product and then figure out how we're going to get it into our store consistently and then send them to a distributor and hope they get listed. We're not going to have to deal with any of that. They already have the distributor. It makes it a much easier yes for that buyer to bring your product in. Okay, so really quickly, I'm gonna just kind of run through these things that helped me with the growth of my business, because it's not easy starting a food business. It's much harder than most people think it is. And when I started, when most of us start, we really don't realize that it is going to be so challenging, right? But there are ways that you can be successful. You can do this too. Again, I started out just like you guys. You can absolutely do this too. So here are some of the things that helped me through this process. The first thing is consistency. So again, those big, scary, hard things that you have to do that no one wants to do, and you know, it kind of sucks to have to do them, doing them consistently. Honestly, pick up the phone, call those stores, go to see people. If you can consistently talk to 10 people every single week, your business is going to grow so quickly. The second thing is understanding that the no's are not about you, right? Not to kind of harp on this topic a little bit, but really those no's tend to be more having to do with the retailer's situation than it does about you or your product. So learning how to not take it as personally can really help you push forward with your business. Not trying to force a round peg into a square hole is another one. If a retailer doesn't think the product is the right fit for their store, not trying to keep wasting your time, like trying to force it to happen, and instead just letting it go and moving on to retailers that are probably going to be a much better fit. Overcoming imposter syndrome was actually really huge for me. So again, I started out just like you guys. I did not have experience in the food industry, really had no idea what I was doing. And when I started out, the goal was to have a tiny like farmer's market bakery. And I felt pretty confident that I could do that, sell, you know, my delicious baked goods to people at the farmer's market. But as my business transitioned into an energy bar business, I really had a lot of this imposter syndrome and feeling like, who am I to have, you know, this business that's growing to a national level? And I was having conversations with like people in Europe to bring my bars into Europe. And I just got to the point where I was like, who let me talk to these people? But eventually I realized I've earned my place at the table. I have worked my butt off to be having these conversations, and I really deserve to be in this room with these people. I think that there is a tipping point where you really start to own it and say, I have worked hard for this and I deserve this. And I'm going to own my role as founder and CEO of a national energy bar company. Last but not least, and I'm going to say it one last time, focus on relationship building. This is not just about having a great product or even positioning your product effectively and finding that gap in the market. It's also about you. It's also about you and allowing these retailers to know, like, and trust you. If you can open up to them a little bit, show them your passion, tell them your story, explain why you do what you do, they're really going to like you, and that is going to help you get more sales. Okay, so that is it for me. I'm going to open it up to some more questions as well. But I wanted to leave you guys with some contact details just in case you do want to get in touch with me. So my Instagram handle is It's Nicole Haney. My website is super easy, NicoleHaney.com. And I am launching a conference. So it is a business and personal growth conference in Toronto in October. So it's October 19th. Tickets are on pre-sale right now, which means that they are early bird pricing. So you will get a discount if you buy tickets now. The price is going to go up in a couple of months when I launch it to the whole world. But I would love to see you guys at this conference. It's going to be amazing. I just secured our keynote speaker, and I am so very thrilled to have this person speaking at my conference, and I think you guys are gonna love him too. So keep your eyes on my Instagram for that announcement next week coming up. And I'm gonna stop sharing now so that we can ask some questions, ask and answer some questions. Okay, I'm just checking the chat to see. Do you track down? Oh, that was an old question. Okay. Amazing. Does anybody have any questions? You can pop it into the chat function. You can take yourself off of mute and ask your question verbally, but I would love to, I think we have a few more minutes. I'd love to answer any of your burning food industry questions. No questions? Okay. Well, I think if that's it, guys, I'll turn it back over to Kaylin for some final words.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was wonderful, absolutely amazing. And I'm glad we could have all of that content that you had offered, you had given me. Oh, there you go. There's a question right there. Could you talk a little bit about certified kitchens?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
So certified kitchens, you do have to produce your product in a health unit inspected kitchen. So you are not allowed to produce a food product out of your home. As per the health unit and CFIA's guidelines, you do have to produce it out of an inspected kitchen. Now this can take on a number of different forms. So you can either rent out someone else's kitchen that's already inspected by the health unit, or you can get your own manufacturing facility and put all of the equipment and everything you need into that facility. I don't typically suggest you start out with your own manufacturing facility because the overhead cost on that is astronomical, right? So a lot of times you're paying, $2,000, $3,000 just to have that facility operating. And so what I suggest you do in the early days is find a kitchen that's already health unit inspected and use it when you need it, right? So something where you can go in once a week, twice a week, whatever it is you need, and just pay for that time that you need to use it. Now, to find a kitchen space, I do have a few suggestions because I remember when I was trying to find a kitchen space and I was like, they tell you that you have to use a commercial kitchen, but then there's nowhere that is a commercial kitchen space. So it's hard to find. I would start out by looking at community centers. So community centers often have kitchen space. Sometimes they will rent it out to businesses, sometimes not so much. So you can get lucky there. I certainly did. So I started out by producing at a community center kitchen. You can also look at church kitchens as well. Whether or not you belong to a church or even that church, they will often sometimes just rent it out to people who need it. So that is something that you can look at. If there are food incubators in your area, which I feel like there are, you guys, there are commercial kitchen spaces at food incubators. They are there to support you in the growth of your food business. And so they want to make it as easy as possible for you to get this business off the ground. So those would say would be the three biggest ones. And then if all else fails, you can always look at other food producers who have their own manufacturing space, because oftentimes people will get their own manufacturing space a bit too early, realize it costs a bit too much. And then if you go to that person and say, I would love to rent it out twice a week, they would be more than happy to share space with you because they know it'll help offset their overhead cost. So that's another option as well. Excuse me. And that's actually what I ended up doing. So I went from a community center kitchen to my market booth. Believe it or not, I had a permanent market booth space, and it was health unit inspected and certified. So I was producing there for a second. It was not a great space to be producing in though. and then moved out of that space and I was sharing with another food producer in my region. And so that can really help before I got my own manufacturing space. So I hope that kind of answers that question. Okay, do you need food handler training to work with OAFVC?
Yep, so at the OVC, I can certainly, if people are more interested in more information, it's Tricia and Neil, the manager, but yes, there are the staff supports there, but the center is to help you scale up and to have your product to scale up larger, and then to give you that next step to then potentially go to a co-packer or on your own, that kind of thing. So there are some opportunities there as well. Yes, yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I feel like it's just such a great resource for you guys in that area. Like I would tap into it if you can.
And it's not just for Northumberland residents. So it's all of Ontario. We have people coming from all over. So it's great.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I see there's a question here about kitchens specific for meat products. So there aren't kitchens that are specific to your category or your particular type of product. As a food producer, really the onus is on you to ensure that you are following regulations and ensure that your product is safe for human consumption. So whatever that looks like, right? If you have basically a non-hazardous product with non-hazardous ingredients, that might just look like ensuring that you get it tested for microbial growth and ensure that you don't have any foreign objects in your product, right? So that might be the safety features for that type of product. I know for dairy, I'm working with somebody that's in the dairy industry right now. It's a lot more regulated. There's a lot more concerns there that you have to follow. And I imagine for meat as well, there would be some further regulations that you do have to look at. But again, the onus is on you as the food producer. So if I were you, I would be reaching out to your local health unit to find out what the regulations are that you need to be meeting around selling meat products. But any health unit inspected kitchen will be good for any type of food product. Okay, is it better to focus on one variety or flavor to start, or try to have a small selection to help consumers have more choice to buy into your brand? Okay, so this is a great question, Nora. So it turns out that people like to have choice, but not too much choice. Because too much choice makes people feel confused, and then they feel like they don't know actually what to choose. So I found this when I was at the farmer's market, and people would come up and say, oh, you have like 8 different flavors of vegan donuts. Which one should I choose? And I was always so taken aback by that, because I was like, well, what do you like? Do you like chocolate? Do you like vanilla? Like, I can't help you here because it depends on what you want, basically. What are you in the mood for? And then I slowly started to realize, like, people don't want to have to make the choice themselves. And so I would say to people, oh, actually, so this particular donut is our top seller. This is what most people try for their first donut to see if they like it. And if they like it, they come back for more and then try some of the other flavors. And so really guiding people in what their choices are makes people a lot more comfortable. And so what that means for a packaged product is having a couple of flavors to start, but not too many, so that you're not kind of confusing the consumers. The other thing to keep in mind is that the more flavors you have, the more ingredients you have to buy, the more packaging you have to buy, the more it's going to cost for basically anything, because every single thing that you order at a commercial level is going to be a per SKU order. So when you order commercial packaging, you will have to meet their minimum order quantities of, let's say, 10,000 units per SKU. And so if you have 6 SKUs like I did, because I didn't know this going in, right? So if you have 6 SKUs like I did, that's 60,000 packages that you have to buy for your first order in order to get all your products in commercial packaging. And that applies to anything. That applies to working with a co-packer, right? They're going to do a per SKU number. And sometimes you can negotiate this down and say, well, you do, 10,000 total. And sometimes they will work with you on that. But for the most part, people are going to want their MOQs per SKU to be met. And so that makes it a lot more challenging for the food producer if you have too many SKUs. Cool. Okay. Well, I think that's it, Kaylin.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
that's wonderful.
I don't have another question. I just want to say this was like the most useful presentation I've had in a long time. Like the fact that we can ask questions and get answers, and like you were so informative. Just A plus. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Nora. That honestly makes all of this worth it for me. Like, this is why I do what I do, is because I have been exactly where you are right now, and I really, really want to pay it forward and help other food entrepreneurs like work through all of this stuff. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have to echo that. That was amazing. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. When you gave me the outlines of all 3 of the workshops, I'm like, can we have them all? So it was wonderful. And yeah, thank you. And happy to have you down if you're ever in this area. Love to do it in person, or if anyone in our group, our food, beverage, consumer packaged good group, or you guys on today, if you want any more information, obviously to reach out to Nicole, or again, if there's something or topic that we can provide from our center as well, please reach out. And to Luke on the call here too, his center is down to the east of us, the other small business center. So please reach out. That's what we're here for. So again, Nicole, thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me, and thank you to everybody on the call for being such an engaged audience and asking such intelligent questions. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Enjoy the weather.
Bye.
Thank you.